All right, so we've got our image that we found off the internet, and our shooter is moving back and forth nicely with our keys, and now we need to get it to shoot bullets. So what we'd like is when we press the space bar that a bullet appears and starts moving up. Okay, but right now, if this guy, if I can actually, oh no, it's going to be kind of hard to click on him. But right now, if I, let's say, in the act method, if I just say move 5, let's say, then if I stick this guy in the world, every time I move, he's moving in the direction he's pointed, and by default everything points east, it points to 0 degrees. So, or if I hit run, it's going to run like that until I get to the end. So that's not what I want. I want him to point north, right? But if I set him up to point north, so let's do that. Let's make a constructor. So remember, the constructor starts out with our access keyword there, which is public in this case, and then it doesn't have any return type. It doesn't have void or int or boolean or anything like that. It just has the name of the method, and the name of the method has to be exactly the same as the class name. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it, and we won't have any inputs. You can have inputs if you want, but I'm not writing any for our bullet. And let's say if I want to set rotation to north, remember north is 270 degrees. So that's the direction I want him to shoot in. Now when I add this guy, he's facing the wrong way. So if I say act, now he's going up. That's what I want, but he's pointing in the wrong direction. Okay, so what can we do to fix that? Well, let's just go back to the original image and see if we can rotate it. So here's our shooter bullet. I'll go into preview, and with tools, let's see, show inspector, just color, just size. Rotate. It doesn't matter if we rotate it left or right because it's just a rectangle. So if we rotate it, save that. Now, see, it's set that if it's facing east, it's going to east or west, it's going to be horizontal. If it's facing north or south, it should rotate, right? So let's stick it in here. Now it's facing the right way, and if we say run, it's going in the direction we want. Okay, so now what we need to do is again, we might want this step size to be variable so we can change the speed of the bullet, but for now we'll just leave it static final. Private static final int let's say step size equals 5. Now this is actually the same step size that we were using for our for moving the shooter back and forth, right? But we might choose to do something different, so I'm making a separate step size variable for this class. And this is a class variable because it's got a static guy here. And final, remember, says we can't change the value inside the code. So we know wherever we see step size in our code, it's going to be a 5. Okay. And we could actually say private static final int, oops, direction equals 270, because it's always going to have the same direction, right? Paste that in. Okay. All right, so yeah, so now we really haven't changed anything, but we have more meaningful names for, you know, the variables that we're using. And then that way, if we decide, if we need to use them, to reuse them, then we only need to change them in one place up here. All right, so now let's see, we want something to happen when we press the space key, right? So when we press the space key, basically what we want to do is create a shooter bullet and have it and set it in motion. Okay, so let's see how we do that. So let's copy, because we're going to be checking the is key down again. So I'll say copy and paste. Okay, let's call this space. And now what happens when we press the space key? We don't want to change our location. We want to create a new bullet, right? So I'm going to say shooter bullet equals new shooter bullet. So this is how we call our constructor, right, to make a new bullet. And then we want to set the location. Oh wait, we have to add that bullet to the world, don't we? So to add, who adds things to the world is the world object, right? So if we look at the documentation for the world object, that's that add object business, right? In fact, we saw that in here when we added the shooter to the world, right? So we want to do something similar to this. Let me just copy this. I'm going to say copy. But we're doing it here. Paste. And we're not adding a shooter, right? We're adding a bullet. So we already have that. We don't need this business, right? And before, remember, we created a shooter and added the shooter. Now we're creating a bullet. So the thing that we want to add is the bullet, right? And we don't need to create a shooter because we're not adding a shooter. We're adding a bullet, okay? So the location where we want to add the bullet is actually at the X and Y of the shooter, right? Doesn't that make sense? The bullet is going to be launched from where the shooter is. So let's just get the shooter's X and get his Y, and that'll be we'll make that be the X and the Y of the bullet. Okay, let me auto layout this thing. Okay, and there's still let me get rid of this extra line here. There's still one other thing that's going to be a problem. So think about what we have here so far. What method we're using? The method add object. We're in our shooter class. Let's compile and see what happens here. We got this message, cannot find symbol, method add object, shooter bullet int. Let's press the question mark here. What's it say? Cannot find symbol, a method. So a symbol could be a variable, or could be a method. it says couldn't find method. Could be a class in some cases, I think too. But it says it can't find the method add object. It says you are using a symbol here, a name for a variable, a method, or a class that has not been declared in any visible scope. So it's saying that add object hasn't been declared, but we know add object is a method, right? But what class does it belong to? Add object right here is part of the world class. So we need to figure out what world we're in. It was fine when we were in the space class because space extends world. Space is a kind of a world. So space knows how to do everything that a world knows how to do. So we can add object. But a shooter is an actor. Shooter extends actor. So shooter does not know how to do everything the world does. And in fact, it has to be the world that adds the object because we're adding the object to the world, right? The world is keeping track of that information. So what we need to do then is we need to get the world that the shooter is in and ask that world to add the object. So how do we get the world? Let's go to frames here. Actor. There's a method called getWorld that returns the world that the actor lives in. So we could say world equals getWorld, right? And then we can ask the world to add the object. Let's see if that works. Yeah, that compiles, no errors. Now remember what we did before when we moved this get x and get x plus step size, get y into the parameter list. We can do a similar thing here. We can just say, instead of saying world.addObject, we don't need to actually create this. We can just cut this out, paste it there, and get rid of this. And that will do the same thing. We'll get the world, and then we'll ask the world to add the bullet object. Okay. Now, what happens when that object gets added? Well, in the act method of that object, of that shooter bullet, it says move by step size every single time. And it initially sets the rotation to 270 going straight north. So it should, once it gets created in that spot, it should start moving up from that spot. So let's compile and let's see. I'm going to say run. I can move back and forth. When I hit the space bar, look at that. Ooh. Look at that. If I hold down the space bar, it just keeps making a bazillion of them. That might not be exactly what I want. When we look at the original game here, let's take a look at the original game a little bit and see what that bullet action looks like in here. So here, I'm moving. I press the space bar. Just holding down the space bar doesn't make it shoot. It only shoots once each time I hit the space bar. So holding down the right and left arrow keys makes it keep moving, but holding down the space bar doesn't make it keep shooting. Oh wait, yeah it does. But it does, but it's not. It looks like there's some time in between shots. Oh, so if we figure out how much time since the last firing, then we can shoot it again. So okay, so it looks like we need to maybe think about maybe like how many steps, how many acts we've gone through, because remember, act is something that gets called over and over and over and over again, right? So if we've hit the space bar, we should probably you know, have a counter that checks to see how many steps since the last time we hit the space bar. So let's see. So let's think this through then. So what we want is we want to hit the space bar, and then if we're holding down the space bar, we don't want to immediately shoot. We don't want to shoot every single time the act button was hit, but only after a certain number of after the act method is run, maybe a certain number of times. That might be a way to do it. So we'll think about that, and we'll get that working in the next video.